Hi, Stuart Talley here. Doing an update again on the Pinnacle metal-on-metal hip litigation and the trial that's currently pending right now in Dallas, Texas. We're a couple weeks into the trial now, and we had Dr. Pam Plouhar, who is the head of clinical research at DePuy, on the stand today talking about clinical trials that were done on the metal-on-metal Pinnacle hip after it was released to the market. She was subjected to some pretty intense cross-examination today by the plaintiff's attorney about a particular study that was done on the Pinnacle hips after it was released on the market. And in particular, there was an advertisement that was released by DePuy, and it was put in lots of journals all over the United States. It was submitted to doctors. It was also published in media that was designed to directly reach patients. And one of the key phrases and comments in this advertisement that's repeated over and over again in all the advertisements for Pinnacle hips is the following statement. In their ads, they said that there were 1 million implanted over 10 years. 5 years after surgery, 99.9% are still in place. The implication from the ad was that there were millions of hips put in over 10 years, and if you look at all the hips that had been in for 5 years, 99.9% of them were still in place. Well, today we learned that that's not entirely accurate, and in fact it's blatantly false. The study that they used to support that statement was a study called the PIN study, and Dr. Plouhar was responsible for that study. The PIN study didn't look at all million hips that had been put in. It looked at 1,000 hips that had been put in over a very short period of time. And when they say that the hips are still in place, well, the study didn't look at how many hips were still in place. Okay, so these Pinnacle hips have multiple parts. They have a stem, they have a ball, they have a cup, and inside the cup is a liner. The PIN study only looked at the number of hips that had been replaced with respect to the cup. Okay, so if the cup had been removed, then that was considered a failure under the study. So when they looked at all these hips, supposedly looked at all these hips, 1,000 of them that had been put in, there was only one hip where the cup had been removed. However, turns out there were lots of hips that had to be revised, but they just didn't involve removing the cup, because many times the Pinnacle hips, the way you revise them, if somebody has metallosis or another problem, is you just replace the liner inside the cup. So it turns out that there were a lot of revision surgeries that took place. They just didn't involve taking out the cup. So this study that said 99.9%, it was only looking at removal of a cup. Okay. Now, as the trial went on, we learned that even in that study, there were lots of problems. So when the study announced that there was only one cup removed, it turns out that that wasn't true, that there were actually a lot of cups that were removed, many more than one. Another problem with this study is when they did this study, they told everybody in the medical community that this was a prospective study, okay? And that's important because a prospective study, clinical study, means that you're going to bring patients into a doctor's office and you're going to enroll them in the study one after the other as they flow in, okay? And prospective is important because if it's not a prospective study, then there's the risk that a doctor could cherry pick patients. He could say, oh, I think the hip's going to work great on this patient. I'm going to put him in the study. And then if somebody comes in who's maybe overweight or looks like they have a lot of health problems, I'm not going to put that person in the study. So by telling people it was a prospective study, they were announcing that it was a good study, meaning the patients would come in and we'd put the hip in them as they flowed in the door. Turns out that many of the patients were not admitted into the study that way. When they went back and looked at the records, there were a lot of people who were admitted in the study who had been previously had their hips put in. So a doctor signed on to a study and said, oh, I put Pinnacles in 15 patients over the last 6 months. Let's put those people in the study. So there was a serious risk of cherry picking. The other thing that came out today was the way this study was drafted. Okay, so this study was presented at the American Association of Orthopedic Surgeons. They have a big convention, and the way these studies get submitted is there's a presentation that's made, and typically there's a big poster that's present at these meetings announcing the results of the study. And drafting sort of the results of the study to get it published in one of these things is typically done by the author of the study. Well, it turns out that the author of this study was in fact DePuy. Even though their name wasn't on it, they drafted the entire thing. There was emails showing that once the study was completed, somebody at DePuy actually drafted the results of the study, and then the employees at DePuy sat around determining who was going to be the author. There's email chains going back and forth between DePuy executives trying to figure out who would be the best author for this study that they had already drafted. Once they decided who the author should be, they sent the study, a draft of the study to the author about 2 weeks before it was submitted. The author made some minor edits to it, and it was submitted. And so this is a sort of a classic problem that occurs in the medical device community as well as the pharmaceutical industry, where you have companies using scientific literature to sell their products. And what they don't tell the doctors or the patients is that the studies that are being cited and published are actually funded by the companies. The results are determined by the company, and then the final study is actually drafted by the company. And then they just slap a doctor's name on it and pay him a lot of money. And that looks like what happened here in this case. And I think the plaintiffs made a very good showing that that was occurring, and that really this study, from the very beginning, the PIN study, it was what we call a marketing study. It wasn't like DePuy was sitting around trying to determine how good their product was, whether they can improve it or change it, and they had some real scientific inquiry or curiosity about how their product was doing. Instead, this study was the brainchild of the marketing department. The marketing department at DePuy decided to do this study, and they decided to do it because they wanted to get more market share. So the email chains going back and forth show marketing people talking about how much it would cost to do the study, and I believe it was somewhere around $400,000. And then there was an analysis of how much the study would increase sales. So when they were deciding whether to do it, there's a memo that says we could do this study for $350,000, and it should generate at least another $4.5 million in sales. So that is sort of what we have here in this case. Really a situation where this hip was designed by marketing people. It was the studies to determine whether it was safe or effective were really dominated by the marketing people at DePuy. And that's not unusual. The CEO of DePuy is a marketing person. I mean, he worked his way up from marketing to the top. So the culture of this company is one where sales are really the most important thing. At least that's appears what's coming across at this trial. So if you have any questions about the trial, if you have a DePuy metal-on-metal hip, feel free to give us a call. We have lots of cases here at the firm. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. You can reach us at the phone number on the screen, or you can fill out one of our online forms and we'll get back to you right away.